Meeting a polar bear. I put my day's supply of food into my day food bag and then began to pack the tent. I was completely engrossed in pulling the freezing tent poles out of the ice when suddenly I heard a deep, long growl coming from the depths of Charlie's throat. I looked at him and then in the direction in which he was staring. Even before I looked, I knew what I would see. A polar bear. It was a female, followed by 2 cubs coming slowly, purposefully, plodding through the rough shore ice towards me. They were 200 meters away. With a pounding heart, I grabbed my loaded rifle and flare gun and carefully walked sideways, a few steps to Charlie, who was snarling with a savagery that caught my breath. Without taking my eyes off the bear, I unclipped Charlie from his ice anchor, and again, walking sideways, I led him to the sled where I clipped his chain to a tie-down rope. The bear, now only 150 meters away, wasn't stopping. Her cubs had dropped back, but she came on with a steady, measured stride. While I frantically tried to remember all the advice I had been given. Keep eye contact, move sideways or slightly forward, never backward. Stay calm, don't show fear. Stand beside a tent, sled, or other large object to make my short body appear as large as possible. Don't shoot unless forced to. Don't wound a bear, you'll make it even more dangerous, and never run. Repeating to myself, stay calm, I fired a warning shot to the bear's left. The loud explosion had no effect. On she came. I fired a flare, landing it a little to her right. Her head moved slightly in its direction, but she didn't stop. I fired another flare, this time dropping it right in front of her. She stopped, looked at the flare burning a bright red on the white ice, then looked at me. She was only 30 meters away now. By this time, my nerves were as tight as violin strings, and my heart could have been heard at base camp. The bear began to step around the flare, and I dropped another meter in front of her. Again, she stopped, looked at the flare and at me. Then she fixed her tiny black eyes on Charlie, who was straining at the end of his chain, snapping and snarling, trying to reach her. She looked back at her cubs, and I could sense her concern about Charlie snarling and her cubs. She waited for her cubs to catch up, then moved to my left in a half circle. I fired 2 more flares in quick succession, trying to draw a line between her and me. She stopped, then moved back towards my right. I fired 2 more flares, and again she stopped. She seemed to want to cross the line of flares, but was unsure of the result of Charlie, so she elected to stay back. She kept moving right in a half circle, still 30 meters away. Finally, with a long look, she plodded north with her 2 new cubs trotting behind her, their snow-white fur coats contrasting with their mother's creamy, pale yellow color. The whole episode lasted 15 minutes, but it seemed years long. My hands were shaking as I stood, still holding my rifle and flare gun, watching the trio slowly move north. But in spite of the mind-numbing fear that still gripped me, I could feel deep down inside a real satisfaction. I now knew that I could stand up to a bear in the wild and stay calm enough to function. With Charlie's help, I had passed my first test.